So we're back with our master of the universe, Tom Teague. Tom, thanks for joining me, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So you wanted to talk about the Fed yesterday. Let's start off with that.
Yeah. So as expected, the Fed cut rates 25 basis points. And personally, as expected, Powell found a way to kind of give the markets more worry. He said in the meeting and in the press release when they cut rates that the blurriness of the data would give them, more skepticism about cutting rates going forward, is essentially what they were saying. It's unbelievable to me how, and he also said that the QT, quantitative tightening, would be ending in December. Well, I have friends in the bond market, and a lot of whom have been fairly supportive of him, for a while. I've always thought the guy was not qualified to do this job and weak. But they were surprised because the repo market right now is definitely sort of on the edge. And the commentary to me was he's sort of playing with fire here. And there's actually people that are in the Fed, like Logan, who are on his side, that were basically saying that we needed to have repo. For people who don't know it, is where we live in a collateralized world. So you can borrow against your assets. So you can take
liquidity,
right? Correct.
Liquidity. Yeah.
And
short term.
And banks will lend that to each other, and the Fed will do that as well. But generally, banks kind of give each other credit and lend each other money. And for whatever reason, there's not a lot of cash in the system right now, and banks are depositing cash with the Fed, and it's made the repo market get kind of tight. And when that happened,
so this is just for our audience. This is what happened at Lehman. They were heavily repoed, and rates changed, and they just couldn't refinance. They were like overnight paper, essentially.
Well, it creates, it's like a kindling. It can start a fire. When you're when you start looking to use your assets and the charges start going up and you're in a leveraged world, the value of those assets will invariably go down. And when you enter that tightness, and it's just a question of like it's not something the Fed can't stop. But one of my friends' comments to me was, I can't believe that the Fed is doing this, and they already blew up the repo market in 2019. So this will be the second time during Powell's tenure that the repo market has blown up, if it does indeed happen. And for me, without getting too much into the conspiracy thing, I just don't believe that he's that naive to not understand what's actually happening. And there's also people in the Fed who are kind of warning against it. And it makes one wonder if the Fed's just trying to drag it out as long as they possibly can, so something does blow up. And, if you look at it, and you look at it in a partisan lens, which I think you have to do now, Powell was an Obama appointee. Trump did appoint him to the chair. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. I think Trump clearly regrets it. And Trump 2.0 is a lot more careful about who he brings in, because he realizes that a lot of these people are tainted. But the Democrats seem to always do better and regain power in times of crisis, right? So they're sort of the party of misery. If you look at COVID, they won back the White House, the Senate. If you look at what happened in the GFC, Obama won, great financial crisis. So they take advantage of crises, and they get power. And it makes one wonder if the Fed's kind of playing with fire here, expecting something to blow up. And when it does blow up, it creates a process. And even if they step in and fix it, sometimes that shakes things for a while. So, I don't think it's like, three car alarm or whatever you want to call, fire alarm or whatever you want to call it yet. But I think this is very concerning that he did not address this point. It's also very concerning to me that you've had a slew of companies announcing there's going to be layoffs in the tech sector. AI is definitely going to be, without a doubt, one of the most disruptive things to the labor market. And this is going to happen over a period of years, but it's going to happen sooner rather than later. It's not like a decade out. So with that in mind, if the Fed's sitting there saying they're not going to cut rates because they're afraid of what tariffs are doing, and then Trump is actually, in China with Xi trying to have some sort of negotiation, and they're making progress with Japan. They made progress with Japan. They're making progress with Vietnam, Thailand. This tariff thing is going to be less of a worry. And then if the Fed's going to look forward, they should be looking forward to the effects of AI on the economy. And someone asked Powell in the meeting yesterday, what about AI and interest rates? And Powell made some kind of moronic statement about how interest rates don't really affect data centers. And I'm like, your job is to worry about the labor market and is to worry about inflation. And you can't.
I was going to say, except when you're building them.
Right. Correct. Well, you can't just worry about inflation from something that hasn't happened yet and not worry about labor for the same reason. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, he needs to be more focused on this. And it looks to me like they're orchestrating. And it was funny because someone put this, Andrew Ross Sorkin just wrote his 1929 book, and he rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange yesterday. So I think it was yesterday. So, it's kind of like, is this like some big psyop that's being put on us right now? There's going to be
predictive programming
right in time for the midterms. So, and like, obviously, I think the best thing to do is to call them out on it early. And then sometimes these things don't happen if they think they're going to get caught. Right.
So true. That's what we're for, Tom.
Right. Exactly. But I think that it's concerning to me. The market didn't really have that much. I mean, I think the December, which was at 90% for a rate cut, went to 65. And that's sort of expected. But, Powell making statements like that yesterday made the bond market, like the longer dated bonds, sell off. And that hurts people with mortgages. So, I can't say enough how bad I think he is. And I used to feel like maybe Trump was being a little aggressive, saying that the guy should be fired. But that level of either, and I kind of believe this thing like incompetence plus power equals malice.
Yeah.
And I don't believe the idea that people are just incompetent. I think
that I don't either.
Is incompetence and
intentional incompetence.
Yeah, correct. And that really concerns me. And I think, when someone says things like that, they have to know that it's going to harm the bond market. They have to know that it's going to put more pressure on the Treasury to fund itself. They have to know the knock-on effects of waiting till December to end QT. They have to know what's going on in the repo market, and they're doing nothing. So it's like one of these like passive aggressive ways of creating a problem. So that's the way I sort of interpreted the Fed yesterday.
Fantastic analysis. I'm going to put this out on our Masters of the Universe show. Thank you for that. I always go to Tom for the straight skinny. So what else is happening in the markets? I want to talk about trade, but what else do you see going on? Where are rates right now?
Well, the sort of swap spread stuff kind of expanded a little bit yesterday. Treasuries are kind of still in the process of selling off a little bit. 10 years back to 410, it probably goes to in this tape with like people being unsure about another rate cut in December. It probably goes to 425, which is unfortunate because it was breaking away. And I think if we had seen a more dovish, sort of press conference yesterday, I think we'd be on our way to 350. Instead, we're on our way to 425, which is ridiculous.
Which is the power the Fed has, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is, and it also helps all the big macro guys sustain a short if they are short bonds. It's kind of free money for them, and so it's concerning. I just don't. I think if you make the argument that Fed's really working for Main
I'm
Street.
David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, an investment advisory practice. I've been an advisor for nearly 30 years, and one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, do I have enough money relative to other people my age? And while that's an interesting question, it's also the wrong question. The right question is do you have enough money to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life? This is a question you should know the answer to. This is what we do. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big proud American Eagle logo.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
Then they would be more dovish about what's going to happen, and they would be more concerned about how the bond market trades. And Powell seems to be completely indifferent to that.
So you make a good point. You know, we've talked about market manipulation and, you know, possibly a big psyop, if you will, but you've got the Fed possibly taking care of the big banks instead of Main Street. That's a really good point. And that's why it may not just be that they hate Trump. At the same time, they're getting rich. It's kind of how they roll, right? They destroy the country and at the same time get rich.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I mean, you know, it is sort of taking care of the big banks, and it is sort of putting the smaller banks in a tougher spot. Which they make their bread and butter off of lending to Main Street. You know, so I don't see the wisdom in anything he did, other than that maybe he's, you know, very conflicted right now. I think he's definitely in the bag on the Democrat side. I think he's been very political the whole time. And I think, like I've said before, that this Lisa Cook person is she's a roadblock to Trump getting control of the board of governors.
Yeah. She's an actor.
Yeah, correct. Because I clearly don't think she knows what she's talking about. But, you know, but we go on here. We had earnings last night. We had, they were sort of mixed bag. Google did really well. Microsoft was a bit of a disappointment, even though they had great numbers. But the market's, you know, it's very overbought right now. Meta came out, and they had a tax charge, and that stock's down 10.5% this morning. You know, NVIDIA announced, made a statement that in 5 quarters they expected to make $500 billion of revenue, which they have like about a 50% net margin. So that makes their PE go to like forward PE whenever that takes place, to that period of time at like 25 times. So NVIDIA is doing really well. I think the AI thing is still really driving the market. I was on a call last week, and people were talking about how some of NVIDIA's older chips, like the A100, that's, you know, been around for a while, they're trading at 20 cents on the dollar. There's so much demand for chips right now. So, you know, I think that's the theme, and that's where most of the
meaning the older stuff, they want the new stuff.
Yes, there's value. People want to use it for different things. You know, maybe not for the live language models, because the newer technology is a lot better, but, you know, there's a lot of, we're really going to a new level of computing, which is, you know, being driven by data center and number crunching and very high powered processing computers and GPUs and stuff. And that is saving massive amounts of money in electricity and in time for people who are using it. So like, I think this trend is not some, you know, a lot of people just look at the live language models and say, you know, they're never going to be able to make as much money as they claim. But I think this is about also cost savings for data crunching, and it's just creating a new world for everyone. Live language models will, of course, be a part of that and at the forefront of it, but it's transforming the entire industry in much of the way that memory did, you know, kind of during the early 2000s.
Wow.
And it's going to be a massive, you know, robotics. Amazon's already talking about like how they're going to spend laying off like, you know, 30,000 people and calling these things cobots instead of robots, like coworker bots. But there's going to be a huge impact on the labor market going forward with this stuff, and with robotics and with AI, and the Fed needs to really wake up about it, you know?
Totally agree. Do you see any winners or losers? I mean, you've got OpenAI, I guess, is the leader out there, but with them going into porn and some other stuff, I've heard they've kind of taken a hit, and reputationally at least. What do you think?
There was the All In podcast. I was listening to it last week, and they were talking about how some of the AI and some of the states actually are trying to make it so that AI is unable to discredit protected groups. So that's like basically complete censorship, right? If AI talks about crime statistics, is that exploiting a protected group? I don't know, right? It clearly is on the minds of people in Europe because they want to censor everything. But you look at like the mass immigration and the crime that has been a result of that. Maybe they want AI to not talk about that, right?
And of course they don't. Of course,
you've got states like some of these blue states like Colorado, and they're trying to pass laws to protect these. And I always forget the word. These people that are kind of considered to be on the sidelines, and that's very concerning. And also, there's fear that some AI is actually already programmed like that by the people who set it up.
Totally.
And I think. And I've said this before, I think, that's why it's really important to have many live language models, because it creates a competitive marketplace. And the best thing to do with graft and monopolies is to have a competitive marketplace. So I think it's important. And I think, what Grok's doing, I think Grok is very good in that respect. There's still some bugs, but I think also that, like they're doing the Grokopedia thing, which is going to compete with
that's going to be huge. Huge.
We already know Wikipedia is a complete scumbag operation, because they're basically allowing for, Vox and weird lefty channels to come in there and edit content, but they're not allowing for any conservatives to do that, or very few.
That cannot come too quick.
Correct.
I'm so happy that I'm going to use that instead of. I hate.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's a joke. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what about trade? What do you think of this trade deal with Xi Jinping?
Well, I mean, I think there's, for me, it's not that complicated. It's China hasn't really been behaving like a good trading partner for a very long time. So you're kind of saying, don't steal my IP, don't send fentanyl to the country, and don't predator dump stuff that's going to hurt our industries, right? It's for most of the other countries, it's just like, bad tariffs that we had in place that have existed for a long time, or, protecting markets, not trying to destabilize the other side as much. So, I mean, I think it's good. I think obviously China is China has this like saving face approach to everything that they've always had. And I think clearly the tariffs and the threat of impending tariffs has scared China. I read a lot about their property market and how overextended it is, and how much debt the sort of local states have. And I think China actually this is what he had to do. And I think China's wanting to come to the table because they fear what's happening. We're a monopsony. We are the world's market for everything. So it gives us a lot of power to negotiate. And we didn't realize that for a long time. And I think Trump's just proven a lot of people wrong on that. They just didn't want new trade policies. They were happy with the way things were working before. And this is
because they were making money. Their communities weren't being destroyed.
Correct. Yeah. But I think, I think Trump wants to have, I don't think Trump wants to wreck the economy. He knows we're going into midterms. So, it's a delicate balance, but I think he's not afraid. And his sort of like, aggressive behavior with this has gotten people to the table where it took years before. I mean, I think they didn't even really get China to the table in his first administration until, ironically, just before COVID came, right?
Yeah. Hello.
So my advice is, we're in election year now. Our next year will be the midterms. Watch out for the tricks, that the Democrats are going to try to play. Watch out for the tricks that China's going to try to play that could hurt the economy and hurt Trump. I think you have to keep your eyes and ears open. We're not in like we're not in this idealistic capitalist world where markets are all, happy and discounting, and there's a lot of people at the sides trying to create chaos.
And buy some ivermectin.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? The next pandemic could be on the way. Tom, thanks much, man. Anything else you want to put out?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah, bye.